Let's get started. You probably use computers and programs on a daily basis, but you might not be aware that the first pre-computers didn't even use electricity, or the first computer program was a woman. Computers have a huge impact on our lives, and computer programs tell those computers what to do and how to do it. For both good and bad, computer programs have altered our existence, so it's about time you learn a little something about them. A computer program is basically a series of instructions that tell a computer to perform an action or a task. Software is a collection of computer programs. Think of it like a recipe. Without a recipe that explains what to do and when to do it, a cook wouldn't know what to chop or stir. Similarly, computers are just like cooks. You must specify when you want a computer to do and explain how it should be done to get desired results. If you know how to write computer programs, you can do all sorts of useful things. You can create web pages, write your own games, or even make a program to help with your homework. Computers use multiple languages to communicate. A programming language is simply a particular way to talk to a computer, a way to use instructions that both humans and computers can understand. Now, how many programming languages are there? In total, there are about 700 official programming languages, and every day more are being created for different uses. The most common programming languages are Python, Java, C, C++, Ruby, JavaScript, and many more. An upcoming one is called Go, and it's made by Google. In this tutorial, we will use Python. Now, what is Python? Python is an easy-to-learn language that has some useful features for beginning programmers. It was created by Dutch programmer Guido van Rossum. The code is easy to read compared to other programming languages, and with Python we can create animations, small games, but can also program robots and self-driving cars. Fun fact: the Python programming languages was named after Monty Python's Flying Circus TV show, not after Python the snake. A number of things about Python programming language makes it extremely useful for beginners. Most importantly, you can use Python to write simple, efficient programs really quickly. Python doesn't have a lot of complicated symbols like braces, hashtags, dollar signs, which makes other programming languages a lot more difficult to read and understand. Now, which companies use Python? We have NASA, Google, IBM, Netflix, and I'm sure you have heard of YouTube. They all use Python to program their softwares. To program any language, we use a compiler. A compiler is where we write and run the code. Let's open the compiler we're going to use for this tutorial. It is called REPL. Step 1. Go on to REPL.it. We will click on Start Coding. We will pick Python and create REPL. Now, as you guys can see, we have opened. Alright, now before we get started, I want to quickly go over REPL's interface. On the top left corner, we can see Files. This is where we can upload or download files. Down here, we can see Settings. In Settings, what we can do is change the layout to side by side or stack, which puts the output at the bottom. We'll change it to side by side for now. We can also change the theme. Right now it's on light, but we can also put it on dark mode if you guys prefer dark mode. I still like light mode. We can also make font size tiny, normal, large, or huge, and so on and so on. In the middle, this is where we type our code, as I'll show you guys in the next example. Now at the top, we have few buttons. We're gonna ignore invite, but the run button is very important. When we write our code and we want it to run, you press this. And the output will show in the output screen. Let's start our first Python program. In this program, we want to output hello world in the output screen, and we do this by using a print statement. A print function prints the given object to the standard output device, to the screen. Basically, the way we do this is we write print brackets, and in print we can write hello world, and when we run this, it will output hello world. Similarly, we can say print goodbye world, and we run this, and now it will say goodbye world. Let's do some more. We can also print numbers. So if I put print 1 2 3 4 5 and I run this, it will print 1 2 3 4 5. Now I will print my name. Print bracket apostrophe Mr. Bit. I want to print my favorite animal. I would write print. My favorite animal is an eagle. Let's say I want to print my favorite sport. We'll go print, and we'll write I like swimming. Now let's test it. When we run it, as you can see, first, if the first statement is print hello world, and it will display hello world. Next is print goodbye world, and it will display goodbye world. Then we wanted to print Mr. Bit, and it printed Mr. Bit. Next, we printed my favorite animal, and it chose eagle. Last but not least, I like to swim. Print I like to swim. We can also print sentences. So we can do hello, today is a good day to go swimming. And I click run, it displays hello, today is a good day to go swimming. And that is how we print statements and display in the output screen. Now that we have learned how to print, let's do some math. We do math by using math operations. In programming, we use math operation to solve hard problems that involves addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. There are also many more math operations, but those are a bit hard, and we'll get onto that in later tutorials. Let's start with adding two numbers. We do that by writing print bracket, and let's say I want to add 2 plus 2. When I click run, you can see it gives me 4. Let's do some subtraction. We'll then again write print bracket 80 minus 40. And let's run that. Let's see what happens. Now it gives us 40. Another way is we can write print, and we don't have to finish it. If we just press tab, it finishes the word by itself. And then we can put brackets. Now let's do some multiplications. I would like to multiply 20 by 7. And let's see what it gives us. 140 right there. Let's move on to some division. Print. I would like to divide 100 by 10. And now let's click run. Now as you guys can see, the multiplication symbol and the division symbol are different from the one we use in math textbook or in math class. Now, I would like to give you guys some challenges. But before challenges, let's go over order of operations. Order of operations. In math, order matters. Let's say we want to print 8 plus 40 times 2. According to math, it should do 40 times 2 first and then 8. Let's check if it does that. And yes, it does. 40 times 8 is 80 plus 8 is 88. Let's do another one with brackets. Print bracket, but inside we're going to put another bracket. And what we'll do is 30 plus 15 times it by 2, and let's see what that gives us. Gives us 90, which is correct. Now, let's move on to some challenges. I want you guys to do print (5 plus 30). The next challenge I will write in comments. Add, multiply 35 by 20. Also, I would like you guys to do divide 700 by 10. Let me know if you guys can do it. Okay, let's do it now. So first thing we're going to do is multiply 35 by 20. And we do that by writing print 35 times 20. And if you click run, we can see 35 times 20 is 700. And it also displayed the addition we did. 5 plus 30 is 35. Let's move on to division. Print 700 divided by 10. And if you click run, it shows us 70. And this is how we do math operations in Python. Let's move on to commenting. When writing code in Python, it is important to make sure your code can easily be understood by others. Giving variables obvious names, defining explicit functions, and organizing your code are all great ways to do it. However, commenting is one of the best ways to make sure someone understands your code. Now I'll teach you guys how to comment. As you can see in this code, we have 3 comments. We have one on line 5, one on line 10, and one on line 11. As you can see, when we run the code, we do not see comments in the output window. Now let's go over some more comments. We'll delete this and we'll say to use comment, we have to use the hashtag or pound symbol. Anything after that is a comment. So I can write this is a comment. Another way to tell it's a comment is, as you can see, it is the color gray. Anything I type on this line will be commented. However, as soon as I go to the next line, it will not be comment. So this line is actually part of the code. So let's write another print statement. This is not a comment. And when we run this is not a comment. However, it does not show this is not a comment. Another way to comment is we can write comment in front of the code. So we can do one of this. This is a comment in front of the statement. And when we click run, it will run the same thing. This is not a comment. However, the front is a comment. We can also do multiple line comments. So we can do enter, enter, enter. These are all comments. Move on to variables. What is a variable? Variable in programming describes a place to store information such as a number, character, list, and so on and so forth. Another way of looking at variable is that it is like a label for something. Let's do some examples of variable. For example, we want to create a variable named people, and this equals to 100. Let's say there are 100 people in a room. That must be a pretty big room. Now we want to print people. And if you click run, it prints out how many people are there in a room. Let's do another example. We have apples. And we have 400 apples. We can also do print apples, and it will give us 400. We can also do variable math operation. So let's say we have a variable named a, and it is equal to 10. We have another variable named b, and b is equal to 6. We can do print a plus b, and let's see what it gives us. As you can see, it gave us 16. We can also do print a minus b, and if we run that, it gives us 4, which is correct. Let's try multiplication. Print a times b, and it gives us 60. So these are what variables for. Another example could be, let's say we have pizza and it equals to 4. We can say chicken is equal to pizza. That means we would have 4 chicken as well. And if we say print pizza, let's see what happens. It prints 4. So now, as you can see, basically we started with 4 pizzas, and we said we also have 4 chickens. And when we print pizza, it gives us 4 chickens and 4 pizza. And that's what we call variables. So far, we have done basic calculations in Python. We learned about variables. And now we will work with strings. We use strings to display message in our programs. Message can be anything. It could be a sentence, a word, a letter, a list, and so on and so forth. Let's get started. Also, in our first program, when we used hello world, that was also a string. Now, we will first declare a variable name, and we'll name it, I would like to name it Mr. Bit. Now, let's print the variable name, and when we run this, it will print Mr. Bit. Now I would like to use an animal variable, and then in my animal variable I would put a string lion, and now let's print animal. And as you guys can see, when we click run, we'll print lion. Last but not least, I would like to print a sentence. So I'll create a variable named sentence, and I'll make it equal to, hi, my name is Mr. Bit, and my favorite animal is a lion and an eagle. And when we in next line, I would like to print sentence. As you guys can see, I made the S capital in sentence. Therefore, I have to keep the S capital in my print statement as well, or it won't print. So let's click run, and now it prints, hi, my name is Mr. Bit, and my favorite animal is a lion and an eagle. And those are strings. Now let's make up a story using strings. So I would write a common story. Okay, so first I will print there was once a boy named Tarzan. We'll move on to the next line, print Tarzan was 10 years old and lived in the jungle. Let's move on to another print statement and create another string. Print Tarzan loved climbing trees and hanging out with his friends. Let's create another one. Print Tarzan loved eating bananas. And let's run our program. As you can see, we have just created a mini story. There was once a boy named Tarzan. Tarzan was 10 years old and lived in the jungle. Tarzan loved climbing trees and hanging out with his friends. Tarzan loved eating bananas as well. And that concludes our string. You can ask yes or no questions, true and false questions, or questions such as, are you older than 30? If yes, then you're old. If the answer is no, you're too young. These sorts of questions are called conditions. We combine these conditions and the responses into if and else statements. Conditions can be more complicated than a single question. And if statements can also be combined with multiple questions and different responses based on the answer to each question. Now, we'll go over some logical conditions, then we'll move on to some Boolean true and false condition, and then later on, we'll get into if and else statements. Let's get started. So first thing we'll do is we'll start with logical conditions. So I'll write logical conditions, and the first one we'll do is equals. So equals, and let's say we have a variable a and then another variable b. So in this case, a is equal to b. Next, we'll do not equals. So a is, we usually use exclamation mark to point out not in programming. A is not equals to b. Next is less than. So the way we show less than is a less than b. how about greater than? So A is greater than B. Let's just get rid of that. And last but not least, we have greater than or equals to or less than or equals to. And the way we show that is we write greater than or equals to. So A is greater than or equals to B. And those are logical conditions. Now let's do some condition examples. First thing we'll do is we'll declare a variable. Let's call it age. And we'll say age is 30. Now we're going to use if statement. So we'll say if age is greater than 25, print you are old. Let's see what happens. And now, as you guys can see, we have a syntax error. We did not put a colon, so you have to put a colon. Let's try running it now. You are old. Let's do another print statement. Print this tutorial is for young students. So now, if age is 30, it will say you are old, and it'll also say this tutorial is for young students. What we can also do is let's use some logical operations. We'll have another variables, so we'll delete this, and we'll say variable A is equal to 50, and then we'll do variable B is equal to 100, and then we'll do if statement. If B is greater than A, colon, print B is greater than A. I forgot to put it in quotation. And now if you run this, it's running, B is greater than A. Let's do another example. So the next condition we're going to learn is elif. Elif is the keyword we use of saying if previous conditions were not true, try this condition. An example of elif can be A is equal to, let's say, a number 45. And then we have another variable B, which is equal to 45 as well. So if B is greater than A, colon, let me fix that. If B is greater than A, print B is greater than A, close bracket. Elif, that means if it's not, and then we put it back right here. Elif A is equal to B, print A and B are equal. And now let's try running it. So what's happening is, first, the condition is if B is greater than A, print B is greater than A. But A and B are the same variable. So it moves on to elif. Elif A is equal to B, then print A and B are equal, which in this case A and B are equal. As you can see in the output, it shows A and B are equal. So that's another example of elif. The next thing we can do is the else statement. So the else keyword catches anything which isn't caught in the preceding conditions. So now we have, after elif, we also have else. Else keyword catches anything which isn't caught by the conditions. So now let's apply else into our current program. So what we'll do is we'll just write an else colon print A is greater than B. So let's try this. But as you guys can see, the numbers are still the same. Let me change A to 70. And if you run this now, it went to the first if statement. If B is greater than A, which is not true, it moves on to the second statement. If A is equal to B, which is not true as well, because 70 is bigger than 45. So last but not least, it goes on to the else, and it prints A is greater than B, which it is. Therefore, it prints A is greater than B. We can shrink the code down. That means if we only have one statement to execute, we can shorthand it, and we can put it on the same line. So let's do an example. So we'll keep the same variables, and what we'll do is if A is greater than B colon print A is greater than B. And if you run this, as you can see, it does A is greater than B. This is beneficial because when you have multiple lines of code, it takes time to run, and reducing the amount of lines will reduce the amount of time as well. This is very important in programming. We can also shorthand if and else statement. So let's say we'll change B to like 450. Now what we'll do is print capital A if A is greater than B, else print B. So as you can see, it printed B since B is greater than A. We can also put 3 conditions in one line as well. So we change A to 450 as well, and B to 450 as well. First we'll do print A if A is greater than B, else print, and then we'll do equals if A equals B, else print B. So once we run this, as you can see, it shows equals because A and B are equal to each other. And that's another way of putting 3 conditions in one line for else and else, for if and else, sorry. Let's move on to combining conditions together. We can combine 2 conditions by using logical operators. The first logical operator is is used to combine two conditional statements. So let's do an example of n. Let's say we have a is equal to 300, b is equal to 50, and c is equal to 900. Let's do edit some font. Now we'll do an if statement. So if a is greater than b and c is greater than a, print both conditions are true. Let's try running it and see what happens. It's running. Both conditions are true. What we did here is we created three variables, a, b, and c, and we inputted three different values. We have a 300 for a, 50 for b, and 900 for c. Now we created an if statement. So if a is greater than b and c is greater than a, both conditions are true. So now let's see. A is greater than b, that is true. And c, which is 900, is also greater than b, which is 50, that is also true. Hence, we printed both conditions are true. Similar to and, we have or. And or is also used to combine conditional statements. So now let's do an example of or. We'll delete the and example and then we'll do an or example here. So let's say we have a is equal to 300 again. We have b, which is equal to 70. Change this. And then we have c, which is equal to 650. What we'll do here is we'll use if statement again. So if a is greater than b or a is greater than c, colon, print at least one of the condition is true. So let's try running it. As you can see, one condition is true. Let's go over the code. Here I wrote if a is greater than b or a is greater than c. Let's look at our values. A is 300 and b 70. So a is greater than b. Now it says a is also greater than c, but if you look at our values, a is 300 and c is 650. A is not greater than c. So then we printed at least one of the condition is true. Next up, we have nested if. Nested if statements. Nested if is basically if statement inside an if statement. So basically one if statement inside another statement. So let's do an example of that. Let's say we have x is equal to 52. So we'll do if x is greater than 20, we'll print x is above 20. right? But we can do another if x is greater than 30. Print x is also above 20. Now we'll do an else statement. Else print but not above 60. So let's try running it and see what happens. Well, I think it's still running this code, so we'll just delete this and we'll run it again. There you go. So now what we did here is, first we showed x is above 20, right? Which is true because x is 52 and it is above 20. Next, we said if x is greater than 30, print x is also above 20. Or you can also change it to 30. Let's change it to 30. And in this case, it shows x is above 30. Else, print but not above 60. Since 52 is not greater than 60, it will not show in the output. Nothing is worse than having to do something over and over again. Programmers, computer engineers, software developers don't particularly like to repeat themselves when they're coding. Thankfully, most programming languages have loops, which repeats things like other programming statements and blocks of code automatically. Now, let me give you guys an example. We can print hello, and then let me just copy it. Let's say if we want to print hello 7 times, we're gonna have to type it 7 different times to run it. And as you can see, it'll print hello 7 times. This takes a lot of time and a lot of processing and memory. Hence, we do not like to do it this way. Another way we create it is to use a for loop. What a for loop does is it repeats it in a range. So let me give you an example. For x in range 0 to 7, print hello, and let's see what happens. Let's try running this. As you can see, it printed hello 7 times. So that's an example of for loop. Let's do another example. So let's delete this and let's do, we want to print for x in range. What the range does is it gives it a certain range. So you can go from 0 to 100 million, 0 to 10, 0 to 30, and so on and so. So we'll go, in this one, we'll go 0 to 5. And what we'll do is we want to print hello, but we also want to print a number besides hello. So we'll do %s, and then outside it we'll do %x. Now let's run this. And as you guys can see, we printed hello 5 times, but it starts from 0 to 4 because we did 0 to 5, but the first one is 0, the second one's 1, the third one's 2, the fourth one is 3, and the fifth one is 4. So it's backwards 1. And the %x and the %s printed a number besides it. So now we'll do a while loop. While loop can execute a set of statement as long as the condition is true. So in for loop, we can set a range, but in while loop, it will go as many times as long as the condition is true. As soon as the condition becomes false, the loop won't run and it won't display anymore. So let's do an example. We have variable a is equal to 1. And then we'll do a while loop. The way we do a while loop is write while a is less than 5. We'll do 5 colon print a. And then we'll do a plus equals 1. Let's try run again. So as you can see, a would keep printing and adds a 1 to itself every single time as long as it's before 5. So as you can see in the output, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It won't go over 6. Now let's just change this to a 20 and let's see what happens. See, this time it'll go all the way up to 19. So this is what a while loop does. So we started with what is programming, why we use programming. We then moved on to what is Python, and we learned about repo.it, a compiler that we use to write Python code in. We then moved on to our first application, which was Hello World. We also did some math with Python, added 2 numbers, subtracted 2 numbers, also multiplied 2 numbers. Then we moved on to commenting and why we use comments and what is the purpose. Similarly, we learned about variables, one of the most important things in Python and any programming language. Furthermore, we learned about strings and conditions. And lastly, we learned loops, for loops and while loop. Now, let's do some examples. In the first example, we're going to add 2 numbers, but we're not just going to add 2 plus 2. We're going to do some more. So let's do it. In this example, let's add 2 numbers. First thing we'll do is we'll create variables for each number. So num1 is equal to 1.5. Num2 is equal to 3.7. And now we're going to create a variable for the sum. So sum is equal to num1 plus num2. And then we'll print sum. So print sum. And now let's run it and see what happens. As you guys can see, we get a number of 5.2, which is the sum of 1.5 and 3.7. Now let's do another example. In this example, we will find the result of 2 numbers multiplied. We'll do the similar. We'll first create a variable. In this case, since I want to find the area, I will do width and height. So let's do width. Width is equal to I will do 30. Height is equal to, let's make it more complicated. I'll do 6 times 7. Now area is equal to width times height. And I want to print area. So let's try running it. And as you guys can see, we get 1260. And this is how we calculate the area of a rectangle or a square. We can also find areas of different shapes. I will let you guys do that as practice. And that concludes our Python tutorial.